Worthless, that's what Garrett Voss screamed at me in front of 18 people during our Monday morning team stand-up. Not incompetent, not struggling, worthless, like I was a broken printer taking up desk space. His voice echoed off the glass walls of our open floor plan office, while every head turned to watch my professional execution in real time. I was presenting the quarterly logistics report I'd spent 3 weeks perfecting when he interrupted me mid-sentence with that trademark sneer he wore like expensive cologne. "Maya," he said loud enough for the interns to hear, "this is garbage, absolute garbage. Why are we still pretending you add value here? You're worthless." The silence that followed was nuclear, complete dead air except for the hum of fluorescent lights and the distant ping of someone's Slack notification. Everyone froze like they were watching a car accident in slow motion. Janet from accounting dropped her pen. David from procurement suddenly found his shoelaces fascinating, and the new intern, whose name I couldn't remember, looked like she wanted to crawl under the conference table and disappear. I felt my cheeks burn, felt 18 pairs of eyes boring into my skull like lasers. The temperature in the room seemed to spike 20 degrees and my mouth went dry as sandpaper. I closed my laptop, slow and deliberate, like I was defusing a bomb, and said nothing. Because what do you say when your boss decides to publicly eviscerate you in front of the entire product development team? Nothing. You say nothing, and you remember every word, every snicker, every uncomfortable shuffle of feet. Because those details, they matter later. Garrett had been gunning for me since the day he got promoted 6 months ago. When corporate decided our department needed fresh leadership translation, they needed someone willing to cut costs and ask questions. Later, he was 32, looked like he had been carved from a Ken doll and trust fund money, and had the management philosophy of a wrecking ball wearing a polo shirt. His favorite pastime was reminding everyone that he had an MBA from somewhere important, which apparently gave him the right to treat anyone without one like furniture that needed rearranging. He'd waltzed into our department with his strategic vision and disruptive thinking, armed with buzzwords and zero understanding of how logistics actually worked. But he had confidence, the kind of toxic confidence that mistakes volume for authority and cruelty for leadership. I'd been with the company for 8 years, climbing from junior analyst to senior logistics coordinator. I knew every vendor, every shipping route, every cost-cutting measure that kept our margins from bleeding red ink. I could tell you which drivers were reliable, which routes hit traffic at what times, and which clients paid late enough to affect our cash flow. But Garrett didn't care about institutional knowledge. He cared about making his mark, and my salary looked like an easy target in his crosshairs. His first week, he'd called me into his office with that practiced corporate smile and told me he wanted to optimize our human resources, eliminate redundancies, and create a leaner, more agile operation. What he meant was he wanted to fire people and needed someone to blame when everything fell apart. After the meeting dissolved into awkward small talk and nervous coffee refills, I packed up my things and walked to the bathroom, where I locked myself in a stall and stared at the tile grout until my hands stopped shaking. I counted the cracks in the ceramic, same way I'd counted my years of service, same way I'd counted the times I had stayed late to fix his mistakes. 8 cracks, 8 years, both showing signs of structural damage. My reflection in the bathroom mirror looked like someone who'd just survived a natural disaster. Hair slightly disheveled, eyes wide with the kind of shock that comes from being blindsided by cruelty. I splashed cold water on my face, took 3 deep breaths, and made a decision that would change everything. But here's the thing about public humiliation. It clarifies priorities real fast. Sitting in that stall with my dignity scattered across the conference room floor, I realized something important. I wasn't angry. I was done pretending his incompetence was leadership, done covering for his mistakes, done letting him take credit for my work, and definitely done being his verbal punching bag in front of people who used to respect me. When I got back to my desk, there was a sticky note on my monitor. "Garrett wants to see you. 4 p.m. His handwriting looked like a serial killer's grocery list, all jagged edges and barely contained rage. I crumpled it up and tossed it in the trash. Then I opened my personal laptop and started doing something I should have done months ago, documenting everything, every email where he took credit for my vendor negotiations, every meeting where he blamed me for his strategic failures, every time he'd asked me to stay late to fix problems he'd created with his shoot first, ask questions later approach to logistics management. I pulled up my archived emails and started building a case that would make a prosecutor weep with joy. There was the time he'd overridden my routing recommendations because he thought Highway 95 was faster than my carefully calculated back roads. The shipment arrived 2 days late and we had to pay rush fees to make the deadline. Then there was the vendor meeting where he'd promised delivery schedules we couldn't possibly meet, forcing me to work a weekend renegotiating contracts to save face, or the quarterly review where he'd presented my cost-saving initiatives as his own strategic vision, complete with a PowerPoint deck that still had my file name in the properties by 3:30. I had a folder labeled evidence that read like a case study in workplace bullying and management malpractice. But the real treasure was buried in my archived emails from last quarter when Garrett had tried to renegotiate our primary shipping contract without understanding the volume commitments I'd spent 2 years building. He'd nearly cost us our preferred rates, until I quietly fixed it behind the scenes. Never got credit for that save, just a lecture about staying in my lane. I also found the email chain where he'd blamed me for a billing discrepancy that turned out to be his own math error, and the incident report where he'd written that my attention to detail needed improvement on the same day I'd caught a $40,000 duplicate charge he'd missed completely. The evidence painted a picture of systematic incompetence covered up by scapegoating, and I had timestamps, receipts, and documentation that would make any HR department break out in hives at 4 o'clock sharp. I walked into his glass office with my laptop and a smile that could cut diamond. He was already seated behind his oversized desk wearing the same smug expression he'd worn during my public execution this morning. His office smelled like expensive cologne and desperation, with a hint of the energy drinks he pounded to fuel his manic management style. "Maya," he said without looking up from his phone, "I think we need to discuss your performance trajectory and, frankly, your attitude problem." I set my laptop on his desk and opened it to the first document, my hands steady, despite the adrenaline coursing through my veins like rocket fuel. "Performance trajectory," I said, my voice steady. "Let's talk numbers this quarter." I negotiated a 12% reduction in shipping costs, maintained a 97% on-time delivery rate, and identified the vendor billing error that saved us $43,000 in duplicate charges. His eyes flicked up from his phone, confusion replacing smugness, like someone had just explained quantum physics using sock puppets. "Attitude problem." I continued, clicking to the next tab. "Yesterday you blamed me for the delayed shipment to the East Coast, but according to this email chain, you personally overrode my routing recommendations because you thought you knew better. The shipment was 3 days late, and we had to pay rush fees to make up the difference." I turned the laptop so he could see the screen where his own words glowed like evidence in a criminal trial. It was beautiful watching his face cycle through confusion, recognition, and dawning horror, like a time-lapse video of someone realizing they'd been building their house on quicksand. He shifted in his chair, throat bobbing like a fish on dry land. "Maya, I don't appreciate your tone." "Here's my tone," I said, leaning forward. "This morning, you called me worthless in front of the entire team, but worthless people don't usually have a 94% client satisfaction rating or save the company 6 figures in operational costs. Maybe the problem isn't my performance, maybe it's your management style." His face went red, then purple like a mood ring having an anxiety attack. "You're out of line," he said, standing up. "This is exactly the kind of insubordination I'm talking about." "Insubordination," I repeated, standing up. Myself, interesting choice of words, because according to the Employee Handbook Section 4.3, public humiliation and verbal abuse constitute hostile work environment violations punishable by disciplinary action up to and including termination. I reached into my bag and pulled out a printed copy of the handbook, bookmarked and highlighted like I was preparing for the bar exam. Page 67. I said, sliding it across his desk. I memorized it this afternoon, along with the company's whistleblower protection policies and the contact information for our regional labor relations board. I'd also printed out the email addresses for corporate HR, the district manager, and our company's ethics hotline, because nothing says professional development like having multiple avenues for reporting workplace abuse silence, the kind that settles like dust after an explosion. Garrett stared at the handbook like it was written in hieroglyphics, then looked at me like I'd just sprouted horns and started speaking Latin. You can't be serious, he said, voice cracking. This is blackmail, this is documentation, I corrected him. The kind smart employees keep when their managers forget that respect flows both ways. And here's what else I have. I clicked to another tab. A detailed log of every project I'd completed, every cost savings I'd identified, every weekend I'd worked to clean up his messes, complete with dates, times, and financial impact. He was looking at 8 years of excellence reduced to spreadsheet rows, and he was finally understanding that calling me worthless wasn't just cruel, it was demonstrably false. I closed my laptop and headed for the door, but turned back at the threshold. Oh, and Garrett. Next time you want to call someone worthless in public, make sure you understand what they're actually worth to this company, because I do. And more importantly, I can prove it. I walked out of his office with my spine straight and my head high, leaving him to marinate in the sudden realization that his favorite punching bag had just shown him her teeth. But the best part, the absolute cherry on top of this corporate revenge sundae, was yet to come. And it was walking through the front lobby at exactly 8:15 the next morning. If you're nodding along, thinking been there, done that, bought the t-shirt, hit that subscribe button, because 97% of you are watching without subscribing, and honestly, that's more disappointing than Garrett's management style. We're chasing our first 10,000 subscribers like it's a performance improvement plan that actually makes sense, so smash that button, and let's build an army of workplace warriors. Back to the beautiful destruction of a workplace bully. The next morning, I arrived early, not because I was eager to face round 2 of Garrett's tantrum, but because I had work to do, real work, the kind that keeps a company running while managers play politics in glass offices. I was reviewing the monthly vendor reports when I heard it, the unmistakable sound of expensive shoes clicking across marble, followed by the kind of hushed, reverent whispers that meant only one thing: Vincent Caldero. The owner was in the building. Vincent didn't visit often. He had 12 other locations to manage and 3 different time zones worth of logistics operations to oversee. But when he showed up, it was usually because someone somewhere had screwed something up spectacularly and needed a personal reminder about accountability. He was the kind of owner who still remembered loading trucks at 4 a.m. and dealing with drivers who thought GPAL was a government conspiracy. I glanced up from my screen and saw him walking through the office, flanked by his assistant and our district manager, Patricia, a woman who looked like she'd rather be anywhere else on earth. His silver hair was perfectly styled, his navy suit probably cost more than my car, and his expression was the kind of neutral mask that meant someone was about to have a very bad day. He moved through the office like a shark through water, purposeful, predatory, completely in his element. Vincent was the kind of owner who'd built his logistics empire from a single truck and a pager. In the 80s, he understood operations in his bones and had zero patience for managers who couldn't tell the difference between leadership and ego massage. He'd survived 3 recessions, 2 hostile takeover attempts, and countless MBA graduates who thought they could teach him how to run his own business. So when he showed up unannounced, it meant someone had caught his attention, and not in a good way. I went back to my reports, but kept one ear tuned to the executive theater happening 20 feet away. Vincent was making rounds, talking to people who actually did the work, asking questions that revealed whether you knew your business or just knew how to sound like you did. He wasn't checking PowerPoint presentations or strategic alignment charts. He was talking to Janet about client retention rates and asking David about vendor performance metrics, real questions that required real answers from people who actually touched the work every day. Garrett, of course, was nowhere to be seen, probably hiding in the break room or practicing his excuses in the mirror. But Vincent wasn't looking for Garrett yet. He was doing what smart leaders do when they suspect something's wrong. He was gathering intelligence from the people who actually kept the lights on. He stopped at Janet's desk, our senior client liaison, and I watched her face light up as she walked him through the customer retention metrics. She pulled up charts, showed him trend lines, explained the correlation between delivery performance and customer satisfaction. Vincent nodded, asked follow-up questions that proved he was actually listening, then moved on to David in procurement. Same pattern, respectful questions, genuine interest in the answers, the kind of engagement that made people feel valued instead of interrogated. Then he stopped at my desk and everything changed. Maya, right? He said, extending his hand. Vincent Caldero. His handshake was firm and calloused, like someone who'd actually loaded trucks before buying them. I stood up probably a little too fast and shook his hand. Yes, sir. Maya Chen, Senior Logistics Coordinator. He smiled, the kind of smile that reaches your eyes and stays there. Good. I've been hearing interesting things about your work, particularly the cost savings initiative you spearheaded last quarter. My heart started beating faster, not from nerves, but from something I hadn't felt in months, recognition from someone who actually understood what I did for a living. Patricia had been talking to him about my work, which meant either I was in trouble or someone had finally noticed that I had been holding this department together with duct tape and caffeine. Thank you, sir, I said, trying to keep my voice steady. It was really just identifying inefficiencies in our routing algorithms and vendor contracts. He raised an eyebrow. Just identifying inefficiencies, Patricia tells me. You saved us nearly $60,000 in the last quarter alone and improved delivery times by 15%. That's not just identification, that's execution. I felt my cheeks warm, but this time it wasn't from embarrassment. It was from something I'd almost forgotten. What it felt like to have your work acknowledged by someone who mattered before I could respond. Garrett materialized like a bad rash in an expensive shirt, Vincent, he said with his practiced executive smile. I didn't know you were visiting today. We should have prepared a proper briefing. Vincent turned slowly, his expression shifting from warm to arctic in the space of a heartbeat. Garrett, he said, his voice flat, I wasn't aware I needed permission to visit my own company. The temperature in the immediate vicinity dropped about 20 degrees as 18 people suddenly found their computer screens absolutely fascinating. Garrett's smile flickered like a dying light bulb. Of course not, sir. I just meant we could have prepared some presentations, shown you our latest initiatives. Vincent glanced around the open office at the people who'd gone silent at the mention of presentations, then looked back at Garrett with the kind of stare that could freeze champagne initiatives. He repeated, Tell me about your latest initiatives. Garrett launched into his prepared spiel about operational excellence and strategic realignment, using enough corporate buzzwords to choke a business school professor. But Vincent wasn't listening to what he was saying. He was watching how the rest of the office reacted when he talked, and what he saw was a bunch of talented people trying very hard to disappear into their keyboards. He saw Janet glance nervously at David. He saw David suddenly become very interested in his vendor spreadsheets. He saw me keeping my expression carefully neutral while my pulse hammered against my throat. That's interesting, Garrett, Vincent said, cutting him off mid-sentence. Tell me about Monday's team meeting. I felt the blood drain from my face and puddle somewhere around my ankles. Monday's meeting, Garrett repeated, his voice going up an octave. Team meeting, we cover operational updates, project status, standard stuff. Vincent nodded slowly. Standard stuff. And during this standard meeting, did you happen to address any performance concerns with your team members? Garrett's eyes darted toward me, then back to Vincent like a pinball looking for an exit. Well, yes, occasionally we need to provide direct feedback to ensure accountability. Direct feedback, Vincent repeated, his tone getting colder. Maya, would you mind stepping into the conference room with us? I think we need to have a conversation about feedback and accountability. My hands started shaking, but I followed them into the glass conference room where 18 hours earlier, Garrett had tried to destroy my career in front of my colleagues. The same room where I'd given presentations that saved the company money, where I'd trained new employees, where I'd spent countless hours doing the actual work, while Garrett took credit in other meetings. Vincent closed the door and gestured for us to sit. Garrett was sweating now, visible drops forming on his forehead like his internal cooling system had just failed. Maya, Vincent said, turning to me. I understand there was an incident yesterday during your team meeting. Would you mind telling me what happened? I looked at Garrett, who was making a face like he'd just swallowed a live spider, then back at Vincent. During my quarterly presentation, I said, choosing my words carefully. Garrett interrupted me and expressed concerns about my performance in front of the entire team. Expressed concerns? Vincent repeated. What exactly did he say? Garrett opened his mouth, but Vincent held up a hand. I'd like to hear Maya's version first. He called me worthless. I said, the words hanging in the air like smoke from a building fire. He said I was garbage and questioned why the company was pretending I added value. Vincent's expression didn't change, but something shifted behind his eyes like storm clouds gathering on a clear day. Garrett, he said, his voice deadly quiet, is that an accurate representation of what you said? Garrett's mouth opened and closed like a fish gasping for water. I may have been more direct than usual, but Maya's performance has been concerning, and sometimes tough conversations require tough language. Tough language, Vincent repeated, standing up. Let me tell you something about tough language, son. I built this company on tough conversations, but there's a difference between holding people accountable and publicly humiliating them. Vincent started pacing behind his chair, his movements controlled but predatory. You called one of my most valuable employees worthless in front of her peers? Do you have any idea what that does to team morale, to productivity, to the basic human dignity that keeps good people from walking out the door? Garrett tried to interrupt, but Vincent continued. Garrett, shut up. I'm talking. This woman saved us $60,000 last quarter. She has the highest client satisfaction ratings in the department. And according to Patricia, she's been covering for your mistakes since the day you got promoted, and your response to that level of performance was to call her worthless in a public meeting. The temperature in the room dropped 20 degrees. Vincent turned to face Garrett fully, his expression carved from granite. Let me be very clear about something. Garrett, worthless employees don't save companies money, they don't maintain 97% delivery rates, and they don't work weekends to fix problems created by worthless managers. Garrett's face went through several shades of red before settling on a pale green that suggested his breakfast was staging a revolt. Sir, I understand you're upset, but Maya has been insubordinate. She questioned my authority in front of the team. She questioned your authority. Vincent laughed, but it wasn't a happy sound. Son, your authority comes from this company, and this company exists because of people like Maya, not people like you. He walked around the table and sat down across from Garrett, leaning forward like a prosecutor about to deliver a closing argument. Here's what's going to happen. You're going to apologize to Maya publicly in front of the same team you humiliated her in front of. Then you're going to send a written apology to every person who witnessed your little performance on Monday. Garrett started to protest, but Vincent held up a hand. I'm not finished. You're also going to attend anger management training on the company's dime, and you're going to learn how to manage people without verbal abuse, or you're going to find somewhere else to practice your leadership skills, because I don't tolerate bullies in my organization. The silence stretched like a tightrope between buildings. Vincent turned to me. Maya, I owe you an apology. This should never have happened, and it won't happen again. You'll be reporting directly to Patricia, effective immediately, and I want you to put together a comprehensive review of our logistics operations. I have a feeling we've been missing some opportunities that your unique perspective might identify. I nodded, not trusting my voice to stay steady. Thank you, sir. Vincent stood up, straightening his tie. Garrett, you have until end of business today to decide whether you want to follow my instructions or clean out your desk, your choice. But if you ever speak to one of my employees the way you spoke to Maya again, you'll be explaining yourself to the unemployment office and possibly to a judge. He opened the conference room door and walked out, leaving Garrett sitting there looking like he'd just been hit by a truck full of consequences. I stood up, gathered my dignity and my laptop, and walked out behind Vincent, leaving Garrett to contemplate the smoking ruins of his authority. and the sudden realization that calling people worthless only works when you're actually worth something yourself. The apology came at 9 a.m. sharp the next day. Garrett stood in front of the same team that had witnessed my public humiliation, looking like a man who'd been forced to eat crow seasoned with his own ego. His voice was flat, his eyes fixed on a point somewhere above everyone's heads, like he was reading from a teleprompter installed in the ceiling tiles. "I owe Maya an apology." He said the words coming out like he was passing kidney stones yesterday. "I spoke inappropriately during our team meeting. I called Maya worthless, which was unprofessional, unacceptable, and completely inaccurate. Maya is a valued member of this team, and her contributions to our success are significant. I was wrong, and I'm sorry." The silence that followed was different from Monday's silence. This one wasn't uncomfortable. It was satisfied, like justice being served at the perfect temperature. Janet started clapping slowly, then David joined in, then the rest of the team, until the conference room filled with applause. Not for Garrett, but for the moment when accountability finally showed up to work. Garrett's face cycled through several shades of humiliation before he mumbled something about getting back to work and fled the room like his dignity was chasing him with a restraining order. Vincent kept his word too. Patricia called me into her office that afternoon and outlined my new role: expanded responsibilities, direct reporting line, and a salary bump that made my morning coffee taste like victory. I'd gone from worthless to essential in 48 hours, not because I'd changed, but because someone finally bothered to look at what I actually did versus what Garrett claimed I did. The new arrangement meant I reported directly to Patricia, who actually understood logistics and appreciated competence over compliance with incompetent authority. It meant my ideas got heard, my expertise got valued, and my weekends stopped being sacrificed to fix other people's strategic vision failures. But the sweetest part came 2 weeks later when Garrett cleaned out his desk. Not fired officially, just decided to pursue other opportunities, which is corporate speak for jumped before he was pushed. His replacement was an internal promotion, Janet, from client relations, someone who understood that managing people meant supporting them, not breaking them down in public forums. I kept the printed email where Vincent thanked me for bringing the logistics review to his attention and implementing changes that would save the company an estimated $200,000 annually. That email lives in my desk drawer right next to Garrett's old business card, which I kept as a reminder that worthless is what mediocre people call competence when they're too threatened to admit it. Vincent stopped by my desk one more time before he left for his next location, leaning against my cubicle wall with the easy confidence of someone who'd built something lasting. "Maya," he said, "you did good work here, not just the logistics stuff, but standing up for yourself. Too many people let bullies win because fighting back feels harder than just taking it. You didn't take it, and that matters." I looked up from my computer screen. "Thank you, sir. That means more than you know," he smiled, the kind of smile that reaches your eyes and stays there. Vincent Caldero didn't become successful by accident. He understood that companies are built by people who care about their work and torn down by people who care more about their image than their impact. He also understood that when you find people who save you $60,000 a quarter, you don't let some MBA with a bad attitude drive them away. You protect them, promote them, and you make damn sure they know their value. 6 months later, I'm still here, still saving the company money, still improving delivery times, still proving every day that worthless was never about my performance. It was about Garrett's insecurity and his need to make someone else smaller so he could feel bigger. But here's what I learned from getting screamed at in front of 18 people. Bullies count on you staying quiet. They count on you being too shocked, too embarrassed, too professional to fight back. They weaponize your politeness against you, and they assume your competence will keep you trapped under their incompetence forever. Sometimes the best thing you can do is document everything. Keep receipts, prepare for war, and wait for the right moment to show them that worthless people don't usually have the evidence to destroy your career in a single meeting. Thanks for watching, you workplace warriors. Hit that subscribe button, and remember, the next time someone calls you worthless, make sure you know exactly how much you're worth, because they probably don't.